The Cambridge Glass Company was chartered in 1873 by a group of Cambridge, Ohio businessmen, so it's from Cambridge, Ohio, not Massachusetts. It wasn't until 1899 when it was purchased by the newly formed National Glass Company, and then funds became available to start the construction of the new glass factory. In 1901, the Cambridge Glass Company was organized by Myron Case, Casey Morris, Addison Thompson, Andy Heron, and Fred Rosemond, who were owners of the National Glass Company of Pennsylvania. During the construction of the plant, Arthur J. Bennett, who was actually from England, was hired to manage the new factory, and he had experience in the china and glass trade, and he was really an excellent choice for the position. The first piece of glass, which was a 3-pint pitcher, was produced in May of 1902, and a variety of heavy press patterns were produced during the next 5 years. Many of the company's first trademarks came into being, the words "near cut" pressed into the glass. Around 1907, the National Glass Company had some big financial problems that ended in receivership of the company. But by supplementing his life savings with local bank financing, Mr. Bennett was able to raise the necessary $500,000 to purchase the Cambridge Glass Company in its entirety. That's a lot of money back then. The company continued to prosper under his ownership, and in 1910, it was expanded to include an additional plant near Byesville, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, Byesville, Ohio, under the name Byesville Glass and Lamp Company. Many of the deep plate etched patterns were introduced during this time period, some of which were Marjorie and Betty, named after members of Mr. Bennett's family. Through these years, the company operated its own coal mines and consumed 50 tons daily, producing raw glass to fire in its melting pots. It also used natural gas produced from its own wells. This abundant supply of natural resources was one of the main reasons for locating this factory to Ohio. In the 1920s, a new trademark appeared on Cambridge Glass items. They added the letter C to their line, and they had as many as 700 employees working 3 shifts a day. Very strong lines of colored ware and complete dinner services were then added to production from the 56 pots of glass being used, and figural shapes became popular in occasional pieces. The company was also producing a complete line of pharmaceutical items. It was said, if it will sell, Cambridge will produce it. In the 1930s, a lot of new colors were added, including carmine, royal blue, crown Tuscan, and heather bloom. And new patterns, the caprice line, the statuesque stem line, rose point etching were also developed. Mr. Bennett served as president of the company, and his son Wilbur L. Orm was vice president. And in July 1939, Mr. Bennett actually sold the controlling interest of the company to his son-in-law, who continued to develop designs and colors. In 1950, the Cambridge square pattern won top honors across the United States for its modern design. In the early 1950s, the demand for fine handmade glassware began to decrease, and the competition of foreign machine-made glassware was taking its toll. So in 1954, Mr. Orm decided to close the plant, ending one of the best and most prosperous glass companies the world ever knew. But that wasn't the end for Cambridge Glass, because shortly after closing, the company was sold to a firm headed by Sidney Albert of Akron, Ohio, and the plant reopened in March of 1955. But sales were kind of poor in 1956, and Morrison Industries Limited of Boston, Massachusetts acquired possession. Sales continued to be slow, and management had problems, and the company did eventually close its doors in 1958. But in 1960, the Imperial Glass Company of Bel Air, Ohio, acquired the Cambridge molds and equipment, so things were still able to be produced in the Cambridge style. Imperial held on for quite a while, but in 1984 they were forced into bankruptcy, and at this time the National Cambridge Collectors purchased most of the molds and all of the etching and decorating plates and other assets of the Cambridge glass from Imperial. These items are now located on the museum grounds. The NCC, due to a lack of funds, couldn't purchase all of the molds, so some are now owned by other glass companies. The Cambridge Glass Factory building was finally demolished in 1989, where the owners decided the factory had deteriorated beyond repair. All the buildings were razed. It was stated by many people in Cambridge that the skyline of Cambridge would never be the same. But it leaves one heck of a legacy, because these pieces are sold all over the internet and at auction, and they're really part of a period that's called elegant glass, and it's just a really fantastic collection to start and get your hands on.